Well, I look, what I like in music, as you know, is silence, which is to say, all of the sounds that take place when we ourselves don't make them. So that that experience through our hearing is constantly changing. Sometimes it has sounds that many people don't like or that they think interrupt whatever else is going on. But I've changed my mind to the fact that I enjoy all the things that I hear, whether they act as a truck does when it passes down the street, blocking something else out, or not. Everything as a result is interesting. And we're living now more and more, not only in a world full of noise, but one full of all kinds of things that we can perceive through our senses. but rather seems matter of cause, only toward when this, that I prove, or going, oh, himself I needs and capitalized on, clicker in your pocket. I was born in Los Angeles, in the Good Samaritan Hospital.
This is a party for John Cage.
Il y a des phrases que j'aime bien. Imprégné de l'oxygène nécessaire à l'explosion. Voilà ce qu'est la création, en fait, quoi. Il faut toujours s'imprégner de l'oxygène nécessaire.
The unknown.
Think of a chemical compound which had part of its ingredients being Beethoven's Fifth and Louie Louie at the same time, coexisting in the same universe, and all part of the same substance.
Chaos. Chaos is the big kahuna.
Some may ask, why act now? Why not wait? The answer is clear. The world could wait no longer.
Who is by chance?
I have nothing to say. And I am saying it.
So this is P Fiat 2, right?
That'd be a John Cage. Homage to John. I sneezed for him.
I suspect that the brain uses maybe 10 or more different methods all simultaneously. So the brain is like a little civilization, and it has a lot of specialists and a lot of generalists, and it has workers and managers.
Das ist also unser Stau, da ist alles drin in dem. Das ist ein Affenhirn.
Why not? Nobody's ever heard it. Let's listen to it.
Cage ist die Rache der toten Indianer an der europäischen Musik.
There seems to be a condition of hysteria after 1931 in how generates fire. If someone could get off a good joke every 10 days, well, nearly 40% of the membership. Well, it's hard to imagine as many newcomers this time. It's certain that there will be many more than 100 new representatives. It also appears that something's missing here. The prospect of a huge bipartisan upheaval. In the past, some of the public work in Congress have meant a reversal of party control as well. Republicans lost more than 100 House seats in this year. We're facing an astonishing political event, a wholesale exchange of bodies in which balance of power between the two parties may remain largely unaffected. When the smoke clears, Democrats are likely to keep roughly the major.
This is something that John Cage wrote in, that's actually, he spoke in 1937, and it was first printed in 1958. We've all experienced this, I'm sure. You've ridden in a car and changed stations and tried to make, being obsessive creators, trying to make music out of it or sounds or whatever, but since 1937 is a long time ago. The future of music, credo. I believe that the use of noise, wherever we are, what we hear is mostly noise. And when we ignore it, it disturbs us. And when we listen to it, we find it fascinating. And the sound of a truck at 50 miles per hour, static between stations, rain, we want to capture and control these sounds, to use them not as sound effects, but as musical instruments. And every film studio has a library of sound effects recorded on film. Within a film photography, it is now possible to control the amplitude and frequency of any one of these sounds and to give to it rhythms within and beyond the reach of the imagination. Given 4 film photographs, we can compose and perform a quartet for explosive motor, wind, heartbeat, and landslide. To make music. If this word music is sacred and reserved for 18th and 19th century instruments, we can substitute a more meaningful term, organization of sound. We'll continue and increase until we reach a music produced through the aid of electronic instruments. And that's where we are, folks. In the 90s, huh? Yeah, it's wonderful.
So you were 1 year old when you wrote that?
Yeah, I was born in 1936.
Andy, would you turn off the phone? Pick it up altogether and leave it off.
Oh, well, I was a student at the Cornish School in Seattle, the state of Washington, the United States. And it was my second year there as a student, and John came.
It was just a chance meeting that I met John.
I first met John with Jasper Johns.
Ich erinnere mich, ich habe das erste, was ich von Cage gesehen hatte, war, ich glaube, bei irgendeinem Festival in Rom.
John Cage, je l'avais connu il y a très très longtemps, dans les années 50. Et il était avec Tudor, et ils jouaient tous les deux des compositions surtout de Cage.
I met John actually the first time when he was here to do your operas.
À Paris, oui, dans des concerts.
Came over for dinner a few times.
Cage war ja so ein Festival-Ereignis.
I was a student just finishing at Berkeley, and I moved to New York, and I remember going to a concert of new music, new classical music, and one of the pieces was a Cage piece.
Yeah, I met him a few times with Rauschenberg and Merce Cunningham through the years.
And I thought about it for days.
I've only heard John Cage on the radio. I've never actually seen him perform. He performed at my college when I was going to school there, but it was sold out, couldn't get in. Turned away at the door. Can you believe it? An avant-garde weirdo like that selling out? It was like a rock show.
Blieb bei Festivals doch sehr lange auch am Rand.
And what Cage taught me was that there's a different way of approaching life.
Et ça m'avait intéressé l'approche qu'il avait de la composition musicale.
Und dieser Rand war sehr wichtig.
Instead of fending off perceptions and sounds and images, that you can embrace them.
Ça s'appelle une opération de chance qu'il faisait.
And come at them from a completely different point of view.
Und Ränder zerstören Grenzen.
The idea that I would actually sit at the beach and listen to the waves hitting the shore, corny, boring, stupid, but he got me into it.
Das kann ja auch schief gehen. Alles kann schief gehen. Das finde ich aber ganz gut, dass überhaupt die Kategorie des Zufalls bei Cage ist schon sehr befreiend.
Louis Pasteur said chance favors the prepared mind, right?
The first meeting was in the Russian tea room or something like that. And the second meeting was when I went to listen to Dr. Suzuki's lecture in Columbia University, and John was there too.
In 1949, and I'd been living in Paris for a year, and at a Hotel Bourgogne on the Ile Saint-Louis.
1938, 39, something like that. He came to accompany the dance classes. And that's when we met.
59 was it? Or something like that.
The next day, when I was leaving the hotel, someone yelled, "Kelly," or no, someone yelled at me, and I turned around.
And it was the total opposite of all my concepts of what music was about.
And John's great sense of seeing in almost any situation in life something that one could construe as being a way to go ahead rather than be stopped. And of course he was so inventive about almost anything that always came out. I remember with the percussion group.
For me, and for most jazz musicians, music is related to virtuosity, how well you play an instrument, and those who play the instrument best they're frequently the better players.
Well, I've forgotten the players, so I don't know which player he was addressing, but he said to her, "Now, you're playing everything absolutely perfectly. Now just go a little further and make a few mistakes."
Ours preparation involves a tremendous amount of observation of what you're observing, the material you're going to improvise on, from every conceivable aspect, until you really know the information from so many different points of view and I would say modes of analysis, that you have a huge field available, actually beyond the material itself. Even the fields themselves are subject then.
So many notes all at once. And remember maybe the first time I met John Cage, I was in some strange place up in New York State, and I was playing chords, and John came and said, "That's very nice." And I was just so overcome. And then he said, "You know, I was never any good at harmony myself." And I said, "This is John Cage, the most honest person I ever met." It was amazing. I was never very good at harmony. Here's one of the great composers of the 20th century. No ego at all.
It's also freeing.
Is it?
Yep.
Is that it?
That's me and my wife, and there's Bucky.
Isn't that wonderful?
John. So that proves I met him. Now I've sneezed for him.
I bet he was good at harmony anyway. I don't know.
And I was going toward the subway, and here was this John Cage coming up and said, "I saw you come out of the hotel. You're an American. What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a painter."
Now, one of the things that you have to understand when you're quite young and you meet people like Cage and Jasper is they have a rhetorical way of thinking about not only questions and answers, but about organizing time.
I like 4 minutes of silence or whatever. the idea of doing that, I love. The idea of breaking those rules, of not being fettered by sort of preconditioning and ability to step outside of the culture and look at oneself in a creative way and not be afraid to say the obvious, the unspeakable, the unthinkable.
That means that they don't differentiate between activities. They don't say, "Oh, I'm making art now and isn't it relevant?" or "I'm frying a fish now and isn't it relevant?" All of them seem to be equally important.
The obvious, the unspeakable, the unthinkable. that it was all noise, that you could have traffic noise and it could be music, that it could be... I mean, I think those speculations were freeing to a lot of us, that added to the freedom. It gave you some license to explore.
I was just beginning to do abstract painting, and John and Merce were the first people from New York that I felt had some kind of authority and enthusiasm. And they gave me, a great feeling that I was doing something that could be important.
I went to see him at Loeb Student Center here in New York when I was about 15 years old. He did one of his word pieces. It was a free concert.
Ich weiß gar nicht mehr genau, was das war. Es war eine Geschichte vor irgendeiner Kirche in Rom. Und man wusste wirklich absolut nicht, wozu man gebeten ist.
Everybody, all these hippies sitting on the floor, completely packed out. And I was sitting there all by myself because nobody else at school would go with me to one of these things.
Quand j'étais très jeune, avant la guerre, j'allais avec mon vélo dans la campagne d'Attique et j'entendais les cigales, j'entendais le vent, j'entendais la mer.
Es gab Töne und Geräusche und Klänge und Leute, die sich bewegten. Und es war dadurch merkwürdig, dass es überhaupt nicht kategorisierbar war.
J'entendais le vent, j'entendais la mer, et c'était des sons qui me paraissaient très intéressants, mais pas musicaux au sens traditionnel, comment les faire. Mais les règles ou les lois auxquelles ils obéissaient pour se faire, pour se réaliser, me paraissaient intéressantes à investiguer.
Da waren Plätze eigentlich für 5000 Leute.
And for like 4 hours, I sat listening to him intone syllables in different languages.
Da waren noch am Anfang ziemlich 5000 Leute da.
And it was excruciating.
Am Schluss waren noch vielleicht 400 dort.
But I had to stay to the end because there was something obsessive about it. There was something really fascinating about it at the same time.
Und dann hörte ich danach, wie der Cage war ganz deprimiert und der Cunningham vor allem völlig deprimiert, weil nur so wenige gegangen waren. Und das fand ich auch eine ganz gute Einstellung zu so einer Aufführung. Er war völlig deprimiert, also es müssten eigentlich alle gegangen sein. Sonst hat das Ganze überhaupt keinen Sinn gehabt.
There are a lot of things that go through my mind, when I think about Cage, because in a lot of ways he was really a first influence, someone who opened all the doors for me to say, look, you can do anything.
I think that if I hadn't met John, I would have met John anyway.
Pendant la guerre, je me souviens, il y avait des manifestations extraordinaires de dizaines de milliers, de centaines de milliers de publics dans les rues d'Athènes contre les Allemands, les nazis qui étaient au centre avec des chars d'assaut et des mitrailleuses qui tiraient dans le public.
Und das war ein reiner Zufall in Rom. Ich glaube, es war in den 60er Jahren, Ende der 60er Jahre. Und das war einfach wie später ein bisschen bei Wilson auch, so eine Begegnung mit einem ganz anderen Kunstbegriff, mit einer ganz anderen Auffassung von Kunst, die eigentlich gar nicht dem entsprach, was ich so für Kunst hielt. Und das Schöne war das Zufällige, also das schwer fassbare.
Et nous, moi j'étais un étudiant, j'étais en première ligne bien sûr parce que j'étais un imbécile. Et j'avançais avec des slogans qui étaient très rythmés. Et dès qu'on se trouvait en face, dans le centre d'Athènes, alors comme ils tiraient dans le tas, toute cette clameur très cadencée se transformait en une sorte de chaos formidable, extraordinaire, magnifique. Moi j'avais peur, mais en même temps j'entendais, j'écoutais.
Then I started to find out about his music, more to do with his concept and his philosophy of music. And I thought it was very interesting. It was kind of Zen influence that you can obviously see in it. And so I think maybe it's easier for an Oriental to grasp it. And I think it was fascinating. I thought it was like the bridge between the Orient and the West in kind of not just a concept, but kind of direction of music.
Today I also looked up chaos in the dictionary, and just as mushrooms are close to music in the dictionary, so I found that chants, which I use in all my work, whether it's music or literary, so forth, is close to chaos. C-H-A-N, chants, and C-H-A-O, chaos. So they're very close together. I've had you might call it a friendship with chaos for at least 40 years now.
Oh, even more.
And I think it'll last,
Another 40.
well, as many more years as there are. Each day provides an example of chaos.
I am here and there is nothing to say. Those who wish to get somewhere let them leave at any moment. What we require is silence. But what silence requires is that I go on talking.
Whether it's literature or film or painting or photography or whatever, it's a language, and it's a language that's learned. And then you either have to take advantage of the material input or your own experience. And oftentimes it comes off the street. I think Cage's relevance was that he was free enough to open it to the whole world. And it may have come off of Duchamp, but nevertheless what he was saying is, don't just embrace the constraints of your language or the historical dictates of your language. There really is a possibility to seeing a potential in every space and place that's there, that the potential for making art is really limitless. And if you start limiting yourself, that's one way of understanding the field, but there are also the potential for really understanding that it's always available to us at any moment, at any time, any place, in any situation.
We have here before us three of the major shapes of nature: trees, clouds, and mountains. The elements in which humanity has developed and which have influenced our vision, our way of seeing the world around us. What about trees? What we all know about a tree is that if you take a branch and separate from the rest, the branch by itself looks very much like the whole tree. In some cases, like a cauliflower, this is particularly striking. You have a head of cauliflower, you can cut it into small pieces, break it by hand, and each of the small pieces looks exactly like the whole cauliflower, has the same geometry except at a smaller scale. You can go like that in certain cauliflowers 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 times by breaking them into smaller pieces, and the pieces again like the whole thing. So what about clouds? Well, today the clouds are not very heavy, but we all know that if one looks at a cloud and then restricts attention, zooms in a way on a small corner of it, the irregularity of a small corner is the same as the irregularity of the whole cloud, at least for many clouds. What about mountains? Well, again, if we look at this mountain, of course, we have these rock slides and the trees, and in some places it seems the first approximation that there are more rocks than trees, in other places more trees than rocks. But if we take pictures of all these parts and trim them and compare them, we find that except for scale, they are very much the same. In other words, the most striking feature of the kind of natural phenomena which we are born with and live with is that they are the same at all scales. Now, by contrast, let us look at this road. This road is man-made. It has been drawn by man by cutting into the mountains so as to make it as smooth as possible. This road ideally would be plain. Ideally, if the contractor had been perfect and if the road had not moved, then it would have been completely flat. The sides of it are very nearly straight. In other words, technology attempts to impose upon the irregularity of nature something which nature did not have, a simplicity, a regularity, homogeneity, which nature is not familiar with.
Dann war ich in den USA, so ab 75, glaube ich, das erste Mal, dann sehr oft. Und da habe ich zum ersten Mal so ein Gefühl gekriegt und auch ein Bedürfnis nach Landschaft. Landschaft als etwas, aber aufgrund der Ausdehnung der Dimension, was nicht wirklich einzuordnen ist, nicht domestizierbar ist, nicht kategorisierbar ist. Da bleibt immer irgendein Rest. Ich erinnere mich so eine Fahrt im Mississippi-Delta, eine ganz normale Flussfahrt mit so versinkenden Ölanlagen, also Ölbohranlagen. Und dann alte Plantagenhäuser, alles so halb verkommen, schon halb im Sumpf und so. Dann die Ahnung, mehr die Ahnung als die Realität von Alligatoren und so, das war sehr angenehm. Aber so, dass da auch der Kapitalismus Ränder hat, die nie ganz einzuordnen oder einzuholen sind. Das produziert einfach über Space und über Raum immer mehr Ränder. Und das ist einfach schön, dass es Ränder gibt und Ränder zerstören Grenzen. Und das Wesentliche an der Arbeit von Cage war dann für mich doch, dass ständig Grenzen überschritten wurden, ständig Grenzen zerstört wurden. Und dann steht man in einem unbekannten Gelände. Und dieses Unbekannte macht neugierig und das macht auch kreativ. So ungefähr, vielleicht.
So why is this the John Cage file?
This has textures in it that remind me of John Cage compositions that I've heard before.
The way that the pine needles have fallen off the tree and have dropped here on the pavement by chance interests me very much. And this morning, it just appeared in one day. Last night the wind was blowing and it was a great storm. And so this morning before you came, I felt like I must photograph this, because it's an example of marks on a ground that have been put there by chance. I mean, they fall, and no matter how they fall, it works. There can be any infinite number of different variations, and anything works. And that's a lesson that I think I learned in Paris, and what I said, that when I would see something that nature had done by chance, that I wanted in some way to copy this kind of way nature works, or create that way.
Well, the creation of the object is by chance, because they're not creating it for me.
It teaches you what not to do. I mean, you can throw away something. I felt that when I was much younger in art school, that perhaps I was not interested that much in invention. That I couldn't, some people are very, very, a virtuoso at mark making, like Cy Twombly, de Kooning, Jasper Johns. They're virtuosos. Germans like maybe Polka and Richter, though Richter works from photographs a lot, but his big paintings use chance a great deal. Of course, the artist manipulates chance.
So beyond the logic and the intellect, the 1% and 1%, 98% of it is learning to use the accident, make the accident work for you. So in chaos, that's really, I believe, what we're talking about, is the accident. And so if you put on the Waring blender and really stir things up, then you have that accident really going like this. Then you, with the logic and the intellect, you learn to use that and create with it and work with it, and then you create out of it. So I know it works in acting. I know it works in painting. I know that it works in almost everything.
Non, c'est vrai que toute chose produit une influence et souvent pas celle qu'on attend. Les exemples sont fameux et il faut se servir du hasard. Mais quand le hasard est là, il faut le remarquer. C'est la vieille histoire de Fleming et de la pénicilline. Il a trouvé des champignons sur sa fenêtre, mais n'importe qui les aurait laissés passer, ces champignons. Il n'aurait pas compris ce que ça voulait dire. Effectivement, dans chaque situation, et en architecture c'est souvent comme ça, en musique ça doit aussi être le cas, il y a des opportunités qui sont à saisir, il y a des situations inexpliquées, inexplicables, qui créent de la poésie, du sens, et on est toujours à l'affût de ces rencontres du hasard. Moi j'essaye souvent en architecture par exemple de créer ce que j'appelle une poétique de situation. C'est-à-dire que par rapport à tout ce qu'il y a autour, par rapport à des contraintes aussi qui sont celles d'un programme ou de matériaux, il y a un choc qui se crée comme ça, qui n'est pas du tout prémédité, qui arrive à un moment et qu'on garde, qu'on exploite.
I got to admit to myself that the best stuff comes from the unexpected. When I'm open to accidents, that's when the most interesting things for me as an artist come out. One of the things I do when I design a character, and I'm trying to design a new kind of character, I take a piece of paper. I don't do it like this where I point it to you or the camera, but I do not look, and I just, because I have a style, I do big eyes, okay, like this, and a little nose like this, and then an overbite, because that's just my style, and then depending on the hair, whatever, it's like this. Okay, now I know this is a scribble. I don't even know if it looks like anything, but it might look like something, and it might, this would be one of those things I wouldn't show anybody, but maybe I look at it, yeah! Oh no, I don't think I'll show this to anybody. Oh no. But there is a basic shape here, and at the very least I've got a monster.
Chance, hey, watch what you think. It can be good, It can be really good. And that's all right. Yeah. So yeah, I think chance and luck and all that has something to do with everything, But I think you also make that. I mean, you have to be in some sort of position to be able to do that,
my use of chance operations brings me into friendship with chaos. So that the first piece of that kind was the music of changes. And it comes from, the title of the piece comes from the Book of Changes, the I Ching, which is the oldest book on the planet. It comes from China. It deals with the number 64 and its mechanism, and is used as an oracle. It uses binary mathematics. And it turns out that our DNA, RNA does the same thing. So that when our parents conceive us, they do so by means of a chance operation. In other words, we are born as a result of chaos. That's why two parents reproducing more than once don't produce the same child. Even when they produce two at the same time, they're frequently very different.
La chance, c'est-à-dire la probabilité, parce que chance ne veut rien dire. Ça veut dire au hasard, c'est-à-dire je marche dans la rue et tout à coup il y a une voiture qui me tue, parce que je n'ai pas fait attention. C'est une coïncidence. Bien sûr, c'est de la chance. Il y a aussi quand on joue à un mécanisme, par exemple, comme jouer au dé ou à pile ou face, qui est beaucoup plus circonscrit, c'est pas aussi vaste que s'il pleut ou si c'est telle goutte qui vient sur moi, qui appartient au calcul des probabilités. Alors, depuis des millénaires, on pense à ça, soit dans les religions. Par exemple, Gaïa, la Terre, c'était... elle a couché avec le chaos. Elle a enfanté, je crois, Hermès, il me semble, ou quelque chose comme ça. Non, elle a fait ça avec Zeus. Mais elle a fait, c'est ça, elle a fait les titans et des divinités aussi qui n'existent plus. Elle a fait ça avec le chaos. C'est intéressant de savoir que...
And you were responsible for anything as a composer?
I try to do my best work.
How does chance operations fit into this idea?
It's to keep me from doing always the same thing. That is to say, falling into my own habits, my likes and dislikes. Chance operations is a little bit like sitting cross-legged. It keeps you from doing only what you like.
But you've said many times that there are profound chance operations and less profound.
It's not the chance operations that are profound or less profound, it's the questions that are asked. If the questions are not good, the chance operations are not good either.
I see. Can you give an example?
Yes. I have never liked, I'm now speaking of former times. Now I like harmony, but formerly I thought I didn't. And what I thought I didn't like about it was the fact that it always had four voices. Soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. So I thought if we leave one of those out, or two or three of them out, that will be a way of refreshing harmony. And when I did that, I got an interesting result from an interesting piece. And I got an uninteresting result from an uninteresting piece. So it was not a profound question. If the questions had been profound, the result of the use of chance operations would have been to make uninteresting pieces interesting, and of course interesting pieces interesting too.
What did you do then to change that? Is that...
I separated the voices, the bass from the tenor and from the alto and soprano, and I counted the number of notes in each line, and I found where the active points were by chance operations, and then I would have a sound start from the beginning and go to the first active point, and then a silence would begin going to the next active point. The result was a series of sounds that had 4 voices, but which had single notes preceded and followed by silence. The result was you had an image of centers of activity moving in all directions. And that's a powerful image, which is, so to speak, the notion of the Buddhistic notion of creation.
Who asks the new questions? You do?
Of course.
So in the beginning, it's yourself who asks the questions, and then...
I continue to ask them.
Great.
And I keep going until I find a radical question.
Wir versuchen zu gehen weiter, zu gehen hoch, zu gehen über unsere Grenze. Jeder Schriftsteller, jeder Wissenschaftler, jeder von uns, jeder Mensch, der bleibt nicht in seinem kleinen Raum, aber versucht etwas mehr sein oder etwas verstehen besser von der Welt, von der Politik, von der Kunst, von der Wissenschaft. Er hat etwas von Faust in sich.
I thought that there was a piece that you were thinking of when you were telling me this.
There was.
Which was it?
It was a piece called Quartets.
between Beverly and Newburyport.
And where's that?
It's North Shore.
How do you get there from here?
A long way.
Questa è una sera per John Cage, che ammiro moltissimo, soprattutto per il suo tentativo di portare la musica più vicina alla scienza.
What is that doing to your brain?
My memory of what happened is not what happened.
The nice chord and a smashing glass at the same time. One thing indicates violence, the other thing indicates rest. How does your emotional mechanism in your body compute this audio artifact that you've been confronted with? What do you do with it? Let's find out.
Therefore, there's an element which is quite expected, an element which is unexpected, an element which is of order, an element of disorder, and art has to have both, because if it's just simply too smooth, it is nothing.
Chaos is disorganization, is the accident, is the tornado, the eye of the hurricane, chaos.
The responsibility of the artist is to imitate nature in its manner of operation. Our view of what that manner of operation is changes with our scientific awareness. Our scientific awareness in recent years includes chaos. We call it the butterfly effect, or ecology. There is nothing that is free of the network of cause and effect. Everything causes everything else. Everything results from everything else.
Well, the butterfly effect is a term that someone coined, I'm not sure just who, for this effect that if you have, say, a process which is going along, and two slightly different states at one time will develop in due time into two quite different states. The process could be the whole weather or the local weather. If instead of right at Boston the temperature happened to be, say, 21 degrees instead of 20 degrees, this would, in the course of a week, mean that we would have an error of 4 or 5 degrees in the temperature. Also, the error would spread to more distant regions, and in the course of a month or less, probably means we would have an entirely different global weather pattern from what we would have had otherwise. And this is basically the butterfly effect. And the name seems to have come because of a paper that I gave in 1972 in Washington, which was called, "Does the Flap of a Butterfly's Wings in Brazil Set Off a Tornado in Texas?" And in the talk, I left it as a question. I never tried to give an answer. But
in terms of the universe and you know, the powers of nature, we have to be humble, you know. Humble and pay our respects, you know, and, you know, do like the Indians do. Yeah. Respect what we have been given.
Well, it's true that my early interests were in archaeology, linguistics, natural history, biological evolution, human psychology, things of that kind, all associated with evolution, learning, adaptation, things of that kind. And later, I went into physics and worked on the theory of the elementary particles, the little fundamental building blocks out of which all matter in the universe is composed. And these were very different sets of interests then. But more recently, I've become excited about the relation between simplicity and complexity, between the simple underlying laws of physics that govern everything that happens in the universe, including the structure of the universe itself, and the wonderful complex structures that can evolve in the universe, such as the living things on the earth.
To obtain the value of a sound, a movement measure from zero. Pay a bird flies attention to what it is, just as it is. Slavery is abolished, the woods. A sound has no legs to stand on. The world is teeming. Anything can happen.
Very different from Germany. You have quite a lot of junk around, including toys. Computers lying around. This is the connection machine. There are 8,000 processors in this machine. It's not the last version.
Well, ironically, the history of artificial intelligence is the reverse of the evolution of a single human being's intelligence. It started out doing professor level and college level mathematics, and we've yet to be able to teach computers to do simple pattern recognition tasks that a 5-year-old child can do. For example, just to tell the difference between a cat and a dog is still beyond the means of most computers, or of all computers. It turns out that 90% of human intelligence is comprised of pattern recognition, our ability to display tremendous facility and subtlety in distinguishing faces, sounds, human voices, visual patterns.
I'm not very good at this. If anybody wants to play and bet me a little money,
Jetzt kommen wir zu dem Kinderspielzeug. Und das Kinderspielzeug ist für mich deswegen so interessant, weil es eigentlich zeigt, was aus unserer Gesellschaft geworden ist. Früher hatten wir Menschenersatz, dass wir mit Menschen gespielt haben, mit kleinen Kindern, mit kleinen Menschen, mit kleinen Männern und so weiter. Und dann ging es weiter, dass man also später die Space-Figuren hatte. Die Space-Figuren, die gar nicht mehr Mensch waren.
Yeah, but they're from. Yeah, this is not running now, but they are LEDs just showing the state of various registers in the machine.
Can computers tackle thinking tasks that at present they cannot tackle? I'm fairly sure they can. It's hard to imagine any particular task that a computer will not ultimately be capable of handling.
It's clear now. The technology has gone to a place where I can't even fathom what to do. I mean, I understand the principle of it, but I don't know how to put the VCR on, you know? My kids do it, like tuk 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 tuk.
Ganz schön. So, ne? Puh.
The fly has this wonderful property that in terms of number of neurons on a logarithmic scale, so in terms of how many millions, how many zeros you have, these huge numbers, it's halfway between the one-cell organisms and us. So our brain is in the order of 10 followed by 12 zeros neurons. And flies have about 10 followed by 6 zeros, so just around 1 million. And so it's much simpler, but on the other hand, it's not too simple because flies can do quite amazing things, like chasing other flies, landing on the ceiling. They are a miracle of, in terms of information processing, visual information processing. It's quite amazing what they can do and how the whole thing is miniaturized, of course, because it's 1 millimeter square of nervous tissue about, and probably has processing power which is equivalent to one of our supercomputers today.
Geht es schon? Ja, nein. Einen Moment. Ja? Ja? Ja. Ja, das war.
Well, the brain, if you go from front to back, generally the sensory parts are in the back half. The vision part is way back here for various reasons, and the motor parts are in front. As a matter of fact, for vision, the receiving areas are back here, but the parts that move the eyes are rather close to the front. And so the output of the hands are connected to sort of a little bit in front of the middle. And that's one of the convolutions of the cortex, great big groove there. And there are some nerve fibers that go underneath and around this groove back to the sensory area. And presumably those are the ones that allow you to imagine doing something without actually doing it. The motor part of your brain plans the next action, and then some information comes back inside the brain to the sensory area, so we call that imagination. So you have the illusion that you've just done it, and you can decide whether it was a good thing to do or not. And probably our earlier ancestors didn't have that, and so they were more or less stuck with, if you have a situation, you have to react. But as the brain got more of this feedback loop stuff, you could think about a problem and say, well, if I did this, yes, it would fall over, but if I did it this way, it would fall that way, so I'll do it in between. You can do all that in your head without actually moving your hand.
There's many, I mean, literally trillions of calculations going on in our brain that are below our conscious level all the time. And it's a process we can't stop. If I were to give you a mathematical problem and say, well, don't solve this for a while, you'd have no problem not thinking about it. But if I hold up this object and say, well, don't try to figure out what this is, because I don't want you to tax your mind. Just don't try to figure it out now. You can't help yourself. I mean, you look at it and you think cup. It's no work at all. That you actually did a lot of work. It's a very complex task that you just did. But you do it effortlessly, and you can't, in fact, you can't not do it.
Vous enregistrez tout sans y faire trop attention. C'est le réflexe qui vient.
Just a few years ago, I was on my way to Boston with friends. We stopped to get some lunch. The situation was a bar and a glass-walled dining room overlooking a small lake with diving apparatus in its center. There were people swimming. I could see them. There was a jukebox playing. I could hear it. I was eating lunch and conversing. It all went together.
Faire tout en même temps, c'est pas évident. C'est pour ça que de temps en temps, il nous arrive un petit accident. Mais bon, là, ça fait partie, je dirais que ça fait partie du boulot.
It somehow got into our brains that we have to be gods, you know, or get close. So, and gods are, you know, it doesn't really matter, gods are something.
We're not angels. We're organic creatures. And like every other organic creature, whether it's a rat or a bird or whatever else, we have our capacities, and along with those capacities go limitations. And what that intelligent Martian would have predicted is that sooner or later they'll kind of hit their limits. At the time that they hit their limits, it won't be that everything is over, but it'll mean that intellectual activity will more and more become the domain of what are basically freaks.
And this is a great relief to everyone because it really is a shame to waste your time on questions that have no answers. On the other hand, I think there's some circuits in the brain that demand answers. And so if you just say, don't worry about it, that's something people can't do. So the brain needs answers. I suspect that that's why we're so smart, because when we see things happening, we make up theories and we check them out. And if you gave that up, you'd be very stupid. But the price of being smart is believing crazy things, answers for questions that don't have any.
Is there ever any silence anywhere, you know? I climbed a mountain only for that purpose. I wanted to see, because scuba diving, you still hear your own heart and your own breath and some farting fish. It's not quiet. So I climbed a mountain to see what it was like up there, if there was and there were these 5 or 6 people, and we would climb for hours and hours and hours. And it would be like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, you would be on the top, and then you'd have these five people going,
oh, what a beautiful day. Look over there. And then, you would go, please shut the fuck up. How can 5 people make so much noise, They've been quiet and puffing and doing stuff for hours, not saying anything. When they get to the top, they all burst into these monster noises, So that didn't work either. But I got sort of an inkling, so I did it again on my own.
I don't cultivate my memory, so I have to be told. The reason I don't cultivate my memory is that Marcel Duchamp, whom I admire so much, stated as an ideal to reach the impossibility of transferring from one like image to another the memory imprint. So you see, if we can't remember one Coca-Cola bottle, when we see the second one, then we can look at the second one as though we were seeing something new. And that helps very much in this day and age. Helps you to remain a tourist in a state of great duplication. And it's true, because each Coca-Cola bottle is at a different point in space and a different point in time. The result is light falls on it in a special way. So no 2 Coca-Cola bottles look the same.
In den nächsten Raum gehen. Dienstag Ruhetag, heute Samstag, darum dürfen wir rein. Und hier das ist der rote Flaschenständer vom Duchamp. Also das ist hier Cola. Und Cola ist meines Erachtens nach ein untergehender Stern. Wenn eine Company, die sowas Schönes gemacht hat, wie so eine Flasche, die man fühlen kann, wo der Schriftzug geprägt ist, der einfach wie Mae West geformt ist, wie eine Frau, ein haptisch, ein Erlebnis, irgendwas ist, was den Menschen berührt, ob er blind ist oder fühlen kann oder eine Hammer hat. Wenn die erlauben, dass so was gemacht wird, so was Hässliches, dann haben sie eigentlich abgedankt. Dann sind sie auf dem Weg nach unten. Ja, wenn man sowas, sowas erlaubt, das darf man doch gar nicht. Dann hat man doch eigentlich das Gefühl der Menschen mit Füßen geschlagen. Und ich glaube auch, der ganze Krach um Charles und Lady Di, der ist an dieser Flasche abzulesen. Das ist für die königliche Hochzeit gemacht am 29. Juli 1981 von Lady Di und Charles. Und man sieht, was es ist. Das ist keine Dame mehr, das ist ein Schwanz, das ist ein Penis. Das ist nicht mehr Cola-like, nicht mehr, was wir im Kopf haben. Das ist furchtbar.
What has interested me very much, both in sound and sight, graphic arts and music and so forth, is to experience each sound or each thing we see as itself, rather than as representative of something else. So that when we look, even as we do at two things that we think are identical, if we actually look at them, we see that they're not. The reason they're not is that each thing is itself at its own center, and that center is a center with respect to everything else. So that light, for instance, falls on each Coca-Cola bottle differently. So that if you look at each Coca-Cola bottle with light in mind, you'll see that they're entirely different. that idea of being at its own center is a Buddhist idea. It goes that every time a baby is born, his cry means, I am the world-honored one. I am at the center of the universe. And creation is seen as an interpenetration of centers. Whereas our Western idea has been often that the center doesn't exist in anything, but off in some world of ideas that no one has access to.
Accident.
Adam Smith.
Albert Einstein.
All the same. Anarchist.
Anything.
Artist.
Attorney General's list.
Bach.
Beyond imagination.
Brain cells.
Burned out cars.
Capitalist economy.
Censorship.
Civil disobedience.
Common sense.
Corporate power.
Corrugated metal. Cortex.
Democratic revolution.
Dictionary.
DNA.
Deschamps.
Dust.
Egypt.
To eliminate.
Empty space.
Environment.
Finnegan's Wake.
Flesh
To focus.
Food Force.
Found object tradition.
Gap.
Garbage. Steaming garbage on fire.
Genetic mutations.
Groupe de transformation.
Hand-catching lead.
Humboldt.
Eking.
IMF.
In a flash.
In between.
Indies.
Instrumental virtuosity.
The international world assignment of radio frequencies.
Jackson Pollock.
James Dean. Jesus Christ.
John Cage.
John Wayne.
Joyce.
Landmark.
Landscape. Landschaft.
Le piano préparé. Light table. Metaphor.
Mexican War.
Mind.
Mozart.
Muscle memory.
Museum of Modern Art.
Mushroom Walk.
Nowhere.
On the road.
Passport.
Pattern recognition.
For playing games.
Predatory market forces. Quantum theoretic revolution. Racism.
Random.
Rat.
Right-wing pathology.
Route 128.
Sans nécessité.
Schoenberg.
Serial computers. Serial music.
Serial organization.
Shadows.
Shakespeare.
Silence.
Simulated time.
Single frames.
Slavery.
Snake.
Strange attractor.
Strange particles.
Subterranean apartment.
Surrogate zoo. Telephone booth.
The forgotten. The real world.
The Wild Wild West.
Thoreau.
Tool.
Tornado.
Total serialization.
Traffic. Transparence.
Turbulence.
Unified Science Group.
Virtual reality.
Volcanoes.
Within one note.
Why?
Why not?
By the way, I want to give, a moment of silence to John Cage. Didn't he write great music? That was great. Yeah. The silent concerto.
On n'est pas les touristes.
Again, I go back to the reality. Transition is reality.
On est là pour travailler, on n'est pas là pour regarder si ciel il fait beau ou quoi que ce soit.
If you ask who made the world, that's a wrong question, because everything is in the world, and the idea of someone making it is suggesting that there are things outside the world or the universe, and that doesn't mean anything, except that we're used to the idea that if you have anything, there must be something outside it. And so there's a whole set of mistakes. There's no reason why it couldn't have always been there, for example. So it didn't need anyone to make it.
You look back at the questions that, say, bothered the Greeks or early modern philosophers or whatever, most of them are completely unanswered. And we can't say any more about them than they could say 2,500 years ago. And those are most of the problems of human concern. So, problems of consciousness or problems of freedom of will, ability to choose what you do, simple question of how I can say something and refer to something, let's say. I mean, the most elementary questions you can think of are completely without answers. We have nothing to say.
I was at one time homeless.
When was that?
When I was very young. I didn't have any money, and I didn't have any place to live. And I would lie down on the street to sleep.
Bah ça c'est les cèpes, ça s'appelle les cèpes. Ouais. Ça c'est la gérole. Ça c'est la tempête de la mort. Et ça c'est les trois couleurs différents là, c'est la pleurote.
I didn't have anything to eat, and I knew, as you say, from tradition, that mushrooms were edible, but that some of them were deadly. So I picked one of the mushrooms and went in the public library and satisfied myself that it was not deadly, but was edible. And I ate it and nothing else for a week.
Moi, je pense le marché, c'est un autre vie. Le marché, si je travaille dans un marché, ça veut dire que je vis une autre vie. Quand je rentre chez moi, une autre vie. Ben, j'aime bien le marché. Même les gens, l'autre il parle arabe, l'autre il parle français, l'autre je sais pas, il crie, l'autre il pleure, l'autre il chante, l'autre je sais pas, il parle doucement, l'autre il dit rien.
And after a week, I was living in Carmel. I was invited to lunch. I'd met someone that was invited to lunch. And it was down at the other end of town. And I set out for the lunch, but found I didn't have the strength to get there. Mushrooms don't give you much strength.
Moi, ça me plaît parce que nous sommes dans la rue Mbem. On est en contact direct avec la clientèle.
Je vous écoute.
Il y a un peu de désordre. Et il est normal. Il est même obligé. Puisque chaque vendeur a une balance avec des clients appropriés. Qu'est-ce que je peux vous dire de plus?
I decided I had to have some food. So I got a job of washing dishes in the Bluebird Tea Room. And they gave me, at that time I was young and I wasn't macrobiotic. So I was they gave me steak 3 times a day. And I had to wash all the dishes and wash the floor and so forth. But I had some strength to do all those things.
And you became a mushroom expert, didn't you? They say.
Much later.
So that interest in mushrooms certainly pertained.
I'm still a kind of, I'm what you would call an amateur mushroom hunter, and so far I haven't killed myself or killed any other person.
Ici, vous avez dans cette boutique 2 boutiques. Dehors, ici, à la porte, on a ce qu'on appelle la porte, et à l'intérieur. Hein? Donc, un peu aussi 2 clientèles différentes. Des gens qui sont pressés, qui prennent un article à la pièce, comme vous voyez là, et là, on se les sert, mais au poids au kilo. C'est la différence.
Nous, on est ouvert le soir, donc les gens le savent. C'est quand même joli, je veux dire, quand on voit la lumière, les fleurs. Puis des fleurs en plein Paris, comme ça, sur le bitume, c'est quand même agréable. Beaucoup de gens nous disent, vous faites un joli métier, parce que y a du bitume, il y a du bruit, et puis nous, on a l'impression d'être dans la nature, là. C'est vrai, on est un petit peu dans la nature. Là, oui, voilà. Moi, je suis beaucoup plus à la campagne qu'à la ville. Hein.
Oui,
voilà.
Avec les sons, voilà.
Avec les sons.
Avec les sons.
On ne peut pas vivre sans les sons.
Sans les sons, voilà.
Il y a toujours du bruit.
Il
faut avoir l'habitude parce que c'est tout à fait logique.
Voilà.
Si on est dans les commerces, on vit avec les bruits. Nous avons une ambiance, quelqu'un, on crie, on appelle les clients, même les autres commerçants, c'est pareil. Et nous avons toujours l'habitude, ça, c'est légal.
Il y a toujours les sons qui rentrent dans l'oreille, quoi. Voilà.
Il y a toujours du bruit, quoi. Et ça fait plaisir. Ça fait plaisir.
Ça fait plaisir, oui.
L'ambiance. On entend les autres commerçants, ils crient, nous on crie, l'autre crie. Les clients, ils viennent, c'est l'ambiance.
Voilà.
Ah, le son, le bruit des voitures, ouais. Oui, ça aussi, ça nous fait chier parce que c'est le soir à la maison, ça fait beaucoup de bruit. C'est vrai. Mais moins que le froid. Parce que le froid, c'est dur. Oui, mais là, on a l'habitude. On est habitué, ouais. On est habitué au son des voitures, klaxon, la police, machin. Ça... on peut rien faire.
On apprécie. On vit dans le bruit, on apprécie. On apprécie. Ça fait partie de notre activité, quoi. Hein? Parce que s'il n'y a pas de voiture, la rue est calme. Ça va pas. C'est pas ce qu'il faut pour une rue commerçante. Il faut que la rue soit... qu'il y ait beaucoup de circulation, qu'il y ait beaucoup de gens sur les trottoirs, qu'il n'y ait pas d'activité, quoi.
Oui, à la maison, on est bien, on dit pas. Il y a des fois, on pense au travail.
Voilà.
Parce qu'il y a tellement de l'ambiance, les gens et tout, alors... C'est pas pareil, quoi, si vous voulez. À la maison, c'est une autre ambiance. Ici, c'est une autre ambiance. Ici, c'est plutôt la musique, quoi.
Voilà.
On entend la musique dans l'oreille. Ouais, les oreilles portent, on écoute. Mais à la maison, c'est pas pareil.
C'est pas pareil, voilà.
On pense au travail, quoi, voilà. C'est une ambiance.
C'est une question d'habitude. Faut mieux avoir un peu de bruit que pas du tout, parce que c'est plus gai quand même, c'est plus... parce que sans bruit, c'est triste. Rien entendre.
I took down the book of Chuang-Tzu, which has a passage in it about Hung Mung, which is a name for chaos. And he was one of the winds. He was wandering about, slapping his buttocks and hopping like a bird. And someone else asked him what he was doing, and he said he was enjoying himself.
Au début, quand on arrive, quand on travaille dans la profession comme ça au départ, bon, c'est sûr que ça nous fait quelque chose, que ce soit pour torréfier le café. Quand on moue au début, on entend beaucoup les bruits. Mais maintenant, ce qui est d'entendre le bruit de la rue, de la machine à café ou du torréfacteur, on n'entend plus rien, on ne fait plus attention. Hein.
And then the other person said that he wanted to, that everything in the world was in a mess, you know, and he wanted to correct things and make everything better. And Hung Mung didn't say anything. He just went on hopping and slapping his buttocks.
J'aime bien le silence. À la maison, j'aime bien le calme, du point de vue auditif. Parce qu'on ne fait pas attention au bruit, mais enfin, on le subit. Hein. Non, moi, chez moi, j'aime bien le calme. Le vrai calme. Pas de voiture, pas de musique, pas de... Les enfants seulement.
But the third time, as in such stories, the third time he answered, and he said, oh, you just want to improve matters, and you'll end by simply making them worse. And that's where I got the title for my diary, How to Improve the World. You Will Only Make Matters Worse. And it was Hung Mung's, Chaos's idea that we should let things be as they are, and that it's our desire to improve them that ruins everything.
The summer before or after, within the period of 58. And I was introduced to him, I think, and then we all ranged through the woods to look for mushrooms. And this is a very strange experience if you've never looked for mushrooms with anybody who knows how, because there's a way to do it. And the way to do it is that you don't look all over. You look as if in single frames at the ground. So you're sort of cutting the ground up into your take, your image. And if you just look, because mushrooms are often the colors of leaves, you don't see a thing.
I think John was questioning a lot of those conventions, and how in questioning them he was questioning our lives, our world around us. And I think they were very profound questions, and they resonated profoundly in the art world and in the music world and everybody else who touched it world. And I think it's had its impact on the general public, finally, but whether they know it or not, I think they've been touched by this man's life on Earth. Because the rock stars have used it, and the movies have used it, and popular taste magazines have used it, and it's been absorbed and subsumed into the mass culture. Not the way you'd want it to be, but
I don't know how to put it, but I really think that he is a landmark in the history of music. And without him, a lot of things wouldn't have happened. Even the people who are never for his music, who are not into that direction, did receive some influence from him, in a sense that they would be having a dialogue. I mean, you can't ignore what happened in music through him. And so that once once that sort of statement is made in the world, in the history of music, then all the music after that, in a way, is influenced by that, whether you're aware of it or not. And so I think that that's how he is. And the only way that we can survive without being totally under his influence is by totally forgetting about it.
Je voudrais faire une tête de veau. Qu'est-ce qu'il faudrait pour faire la tête de veau?
Bah, il faut prendre une tête de veau, monsieur.
Ouais, non, mais oui, mais avec quoi?
Avec quoi comme légumes?
Ouais.
Bah, des petites pommes de terre vapeur, des petites pommes de terre à l'eau.
Voilà.
Bah, voilà. Que vous mettez dans la sauce.
Et on la prépare la même chose que le pied de veau, non?
Oui, ah oui, oui. oui.
Et comment on la fait quoi? Comment? On la fait bouillir? On la fait quoi?
Elle a fait bouillir comme un pot-au-feu avec des légumes,
Ah bon?
un oignon, du thym, du laurier, du persil.
Ah bon? Bah, c'est bien, c'est une bonne idée.
Bah oui.
His office.
Okay. It's okay.
Corridor one.
Andy, you can connect the telephones now.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. I watched attack ships on fire near the shoulder of Orion. I saw sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Andrew Jackson could have easily made it as a stormtrooper. He would have found himself quite happy in the company of Mengele and Himmler. That's the way he thought you had to treat Indians, and he did personally. I mean, he's the one who stripped their skins off so he could have a bridle, for his horse and so on. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, so it's a little before Thoreau wrote, which led to the driving out of the Cherokees on the Trail of Tears.
So I think whether it's blues or Indian music or rock or any kind of music, Western classical, if you can't really touch somebody's heart, I think the soul is the most important thing. And he had soul. John Cage had soul in all his composition. For the things he wrote,
The things
he didn't write. Yeah.
Die eigentliche Chance ist schon die Geschichtslosigkeit. Es gibt die einzige Geschichte, die USA haben, ist einmal der Bürgerkrieg oder der Unabhängigkeitskrieg, der ist fast verdrängt. Der Bürgerkrieg ist nach wie vor Geschichte und ist auch noch im Unterbewusstsein mindestens. Und das andere sind die toten Indianer. Und die Geschichte sind eigentlich die toten Indianer, weil es so völlig verdrängt ist und völlig unterbewusst ist. Und es ist ja eigentlich immer so gewesen, dass die Kultur kommt von den Besiegten, nicht von den Siegern. Ne? Und die Besiegten, auch die toten Besiegten, steigen dann irgendwie auf in die Kultur der Sieger und bestimmen oder variieren die Kultur der Sieger. Ne? Das finde ich interessant, das Indianische bei Cage. Ne?
I think we live in an age that is an age that is discovering the degrees between situations. In other words, we had classical music with this noise, and each one was in a separate compartment, you know, like political parties or like opinions. But now we are learning that there is a relationship even between the extremes, and there are many degrees. It's like knowing only steam, water and ice, but now we know there are many temperatures in between. And the same thing with music. There between noise and music there are many degrees, and sometimes noise is music and sometimes music is noise too.
When you have an idea off in the distance where nobody has access to it, then you have the possibility of a separation between God and man, for instance, in tragedy, like Prometheus, or any tragic Hamlet or so forth. But if you have chaos, and if you enjoy it rather than not, then you have Hung Lung hopping around like an idiot, slapping his buttocks and enjoying himself.
It always, of course, I think because of your references to Joyce about the ineluctable modality.
Isn't that marvelous? I was trying to think of what those words are.
Yeah.
And I don't have my copy of Ulysses with me, but the
ineluctable modality of the visible.
Of the visible, isn't it marvelous? And then in the next paragraph, of the audible.
Audible, yeah.
And that's how we live together, I would say, in society. We live with light, and we live with sound. We live with what we see, and we live with what we hear.
Good.
Good.
Gehen wir noch ein bisschen weiter, jetzt wenn wir absteigen.
Ja, es geht weiter mit Arbeit. Ich drehe weiter.
All right, you can...
I can be quiet now.
Yeah.
What is music?
It's one of the arts. It's a way of paying attention, and I think that attention is paid to sound.
What is art?
The same thing. But it's, if you're referring to visual art, then I'd say paying attention to looking or seeing.
What is love?
We don't know. We think it's loving someone, but we suspect that it may be loving ourselves. We just don't know.